The galaxy was a vast, unpredictable place, filled with strange wonders and dangers. In the heart of this unknown was a dark sector, a forgotten stretch of space that no one dared to venture into. It was said to be empty, lifeless, a place where nothing ever moved. That was, until the message came. It started as a simple distress signal, sent from a fleet of alien ships that had been sent to explore the dead sector. The fleet had been gone for weeks, but their sudden silence had raised alarms. The Galactic Council, a collection of powerful alien races who governed the galaxy, had expected to find nothing. Instead, they'd received a warning, a message that no one could understand. "We've encountered something impossible." Those were the last words of the distress signal, and they sent a chill down the spines of everyone who heard them. The message was cut off, and no more communication came through. The Council, sensing something was horribly wrong, decided to send a powerful fleet to investigate. This fleet was one of their best, led by Supreme Admiral Vexor, a battle-hardened alien who had never backed down from any challenge. He was known across the galaxy for his tactical genius and unshakable resolve. As Vexor's fleet approached the dead sector, a strange feeling lingered in the air. The sensors on his ship flickered, showing nothing, no movement, no energy signatures. The sector was eerily silent, as if it were a place forgotten by time itself. "Prepare yourselves," Vexor ordered his crew. "Whatever this is, we need to find out." But even Vexor, with all his experience, couldn't have prepared for what they would soon encounter. As the fleet ventured deeper into the dead sector, they began to notice something strange. A flicker in the corner of their sensors, a tiny, almost imperceptible disturbance. It was like a shadow moving against the backdrop of space itself. Vexor ordered his fleet to halt, their ships floating in the cold, empty void, waiting for something, anything, to appear. And then, without warning, it did. A massive ship materialized in front of them, as if it had been hiding in plain sight. It wasn't like any ship Vexor or any of his crew had ever seen before. Its sleek, black hull shimmered, almost as if it was made of liquid darkness. The ship was enormous, far larger than anything the Council had ever created. It defied all logic, all expectations. It didn't even seem to belong to the known universe. It was as if it had slipped through the cracks of space and time, a ghost from another reality. "What in the galaxy?" Vexor whispered under his breath, his heart racing as he stared at the ship. It was dead silent, like a shadow in the void. The usual hum of the alien fleet's engines was drowned out by an unnatural stillness. Even the stars around them seemed dimmer, as if this ship had somehow swallowed the light of the galaxy. The fleet's sensors went wild. They couldn't get a clear reading on the ship. It wasn't showing up on their scanners the way a normal ship would. It was almost like the warship wasn't even there. No energy signatures, no heat, no life forms detected. It was as if it had no presence at all. Yet there it was, looming ahead of them. "It's human." Vexor's second-in-command, Lieutenant Kale, said in shock, his voice barely a whisper. The words felt impossible to believe, but the recognition in his eyes told a different story. The markings on the ship's hull were unmistakable. The Council had long since dismissed humanity as a primitive species, barely able to defend itself. And yet, here it was, a warship so advanced, so powerful, that it was beyond comprehension. The very sight of it was enough to make Vexor question everything he thought he knew about the universe. The rest of the fleet hovered in a tense silence, unsure of what to do. This was not just any ship. It was a warship that shouldn't exist. A human creation in a place where only the most powerful and ancient civilizations dared to tread. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the warship vanished. It didn't explode. It didn't leave a trail of debris. It just disappeared, as if it had never been there. The fleet was left floating in the empty void, unsure of what had just happened. The silence that followed was deafening. Vexor clenched his fists. This was unlike anything he had ever seen before. "Impossible." "Report," he barked. The officers scrambled to pull up their scanners, but nothing showed up. No ship, no sign of what had just happened. "It's gone, Admiral," Lieutenant Kale said, his voice trembling. But Vexor wasn't satisfied with that. He knew what he had seen. The human warship had to be out there. And if it was, it had just sent a message to the galaxy. Something had changed. "Prepare the fleet," Vexor commanded, his voice steady but filled with an underlying fury. "This is not over. We will find that ship, and we will destroy it before it becomes a threat to the galaxy." As the fleet began to regroup, Vexor's mind raced. What was this warship? How had the humans created something so powerful, so impossible? He couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to enter a war unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. And this time, humanity would not be the prey. This was just the beginning. The galaxy was on edge. The news of the mysterious warship spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through every corner of the universe. No one had expected humanity to possess the capability to create something so powerful, so terrifying. But now, the impossible had been realized. The question on everyone's mind was simple: how had the humans done it? Admiral Vexor couldn't stop thinking about the warship. It had vanished before his eyes, but he knew it wasn't just an illusion. He had seen it, he had felt it, and he was certain it wasn't gone. It was out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. The Galactic Council was in an uproar. Delegates from all over the galaxy called emergency meetings to discuss the appearance of the human warship. There was fear in the air, fear that something had shifted in the balance of power. For centuries, the humans had been considered insignificant, a barely noticeable species on the galactic scale, but that perception was rapidly changing. "This cannot stand," Supreme Counselor Arlak grumbled as he slammed his fist on the table. "We must act before humanity becomes a threat to the entire galaxy." But the question remained: what was this ship? What did it mean for the future of the galaxy? Vexor was still reeling from his encounter, and he knew he had to find answers. He ordered his fleet to stay alert and began planning a search mission. His obsession with the warship was growing. Days passed, and the search yielded nothing. The fleet scoured the dead sector where the ship had first appeared, but it was as if it had never existed. There were no traces, no signs, but Vexor couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, hiding just beyond their reach. The Council, however, was losing patience. Supreme Warlord Scifi, the leader of one of the galaxy's most feared alien races, had grown restless. She was not a being who tolerated failure, and she demanded results. "We have to find this warship. We cannot let it slip through our fingers again." Zyra's armada, one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy, was dispatched to search for the warship. Her reputation was built on the destruction of entire fleets, and she was determined to prove that even the impossible could be conquered. But as Zyra's ships entered the sector, something strange began to happen. The same eerie silence that Vexor had encountered now enveloped her fleet. The sensors began to flicker and malfunction. No matter how many times they tried to scan the area, there was nothing to detect. It was as if the warship was playing some twisted game, remaining hidden from their reach. And then, without warning, it happened again. The ghostly ship appeared before them, just as it had before. This time, however, it was not just a flicker on the sensors. It was real, undeniable. The warship was massive, its dark hull shimmering like liquid shadow. But this time, something was different. The ship didn't vanish after a few moments. It hovered there, silent and still, like a predator waiting to strike. "There it is," Zyra hissed, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the warship, her hands clenched into fists. "Prepare to engage." The fleet moved into position. But as they did, something even stranger happened. The warship didn't react. It simply stayed where it was, like a phantom floating in space. There was no weaponry, no movement, nothing. Then, without warning, the ship's systems began to respond. The lights aboard Cyrus' flagship flickered as the ship's powerful weapon systems came online. Energy surged through the vessel, and before anyone could react, a beam of light shot out from the warship. It wasn't like any weapon they had seen before. It wasn't just a laser. It was a massive burst of concentrated energy, tearing through the very fabric of space itself. "Get out of the way," Zyra shouted, but it was too late. The beam hit the flagship with devastating force. In a split second, the once mighty ship was reduced to nothing. No explosion, no debris, just an empty void where it had been. The fleet watched in shock as the flagship simply ceased to exist. A hushed silence fell over the remaining ships. No one knew how to react. The warship had just destroyed an entire vessel with a single shot, and yet it had not even moved. What kind of weapon was that? Cyrus' first officer gasped, eyes wide in disbelief. "Impossible," Zyra muttered, her voice strained. "How can a ship like that exist?" But as her fleet began to retreat, the warship remained unmoving. The mystery deepened. It was clear now. This was no ordinary human ship. It was something far beyond anything the galaxy had ever encountered. The Council was right to be afraid. This warship had the power to change everything. And just like that, the warship vanished again, slipping away into the shadows of the galaxy, leaving behind only questions and a deep sense of unease. For Zyra and Vexor, the search was far from over. But for the rest of the galaxy, one truth was certain. Humanity had unlocked something incredible, something that defied the laws of nature itself. And whatever it was coming for them. The warship's brief appearance left the galaxy on edge. Supreme Warlord Xera had lost her flagship, a ship considered invincible by most, in a single strike. The fact that it was wiped out without a trace filled her with both rage and confusion. Something had to be done. "This is no longer a mystery," Zyra growled, her voice thick with anger. "This is war. The humans have made a mistake they will regret." Across the galaxy, the reactions to the mysterious warship were varied. Some factions were terrified, unsure of how to respond to this unprecedented threat. Others saw an opportunity, but all agreed on one thing. Humanity's newfound power had to be neutralized, or else the galaxy's entire balance would be thrown into chaos. Admiral Vexor, having survived the previous encounter, had no illusions left about humanity. The warship was real, and it was as dangerous as it was elusive. But he wasn't the kind of person to let fear rule him. No, Vexor had spent years studying enemy tactics, and now he saw only one path forward: hunt the ship down and destroy it before it could strike again. The Galactic Council had decided on a massive, coordinated effort. Zyra's armada wasn't enough. To deal with the unknown human threat, all the galaxy's top military forces would have to unite. Vexor and Zyra were to lead the charge, but the mission wasn't one they could fail. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Yet even as the preparations were being made, something strange began to happen. Other alien species began whispering of another sighting of the impossible warship. From the edges of the galaxy to places where no human ships should have been, the reports started piling in. The warship was everywhere and nowhere. No matter how hard they searched, the ship was never truly found. "It's like it's mocking us," Admiral Vexor said, frustration creeping into his voice. "It's playing a game, one we can't understand." On the other side of the galaxy, the humans themselves were preparing for something. What that something was, no one could say for sure, but it was clear that they weren't just hiding. The warship's mere existence wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Vexor, Zyra, and the other leaders of the galaxy were all starting to sense that this wasn't just about a ship anymore. The warship was part of something much larger, a force that no one could fully comprehend. And as the pieces slowly fell into place, something even more unsettling began to emerge. The warship wasn't just some ancient relic, nor was it an isolated weapon. It was part of a carefully crafted plan. Humanity wasn't just trying to survive anymore. They were building something that could take down the entire galaxy if they wanted to. And worse, it was already here. Despite the overwhelming odds, there was still hope for the galaxy. The aliens, led by Vexor and Scifi, were determined to push forward. They didn't have all the answers yet, but they knew one thing. They couldn't wait for humanity to strike again. They would strike first. For weeks, the search for the warship intensified. Scouts, probes, and ships combed through every corner of known space, trying to uncover even the faintest trace of its whereabouts. But the closer they got, the more it seemed as though the warship was always one step ahead. "We're being led into a trap," Scifi hissed during a tense meeting with her officers. "This ship is playing with us, and sooner or later we're going to fall right into its hands." Vexor agreed. The warship wasn't just a weapon, it was intelligence, a piece of the humans' greater plan. And the humans were showing their cards slowly, making every move seem like a puzzle they had to solve. Then one day, it happened again. A fleet of ships moving through an uncharted sector of space was ambushed by the warship. The attack came with no warning, no indication of where the warship had come from. In an instant, a whole armada was gone, wiped out as if it had never existed. Once again, there was no explosion, no debris. Just silence. Vexor stared at the empty space where the fleet had been, his mind racing. This was more than just a warship. It was something else, something human, something smarter than anything they had encountered. The tactics were too advanced, too precise. This wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a signal, a message. "We've underestimated them," Vexor muttered, speaking to no one in particular. "But they've made one mistake. They've shown us their power. Now we know what we're up against." Back on Earth, the humans weren't sitting idle, either. From their hidden bases, from deep within their megastructures, they were watching the galactic response unfold. Every alien fleet that tried to hunt them down only played into their hands. The humans had known that the galaxy would come for them, and they had prepared. The next move would be humanity's, and no one, not even Scifi or Vexor, had any idea how far the humans were willing to go to protect their secret. The hunt for the impossible warship had only just begun. The galactic hunt was on. Every major alien power had thrown everything they had at finding the elusive warship, and yet it remained as impossible to track as it had ever been. No matter how advanced their technology, no matter how strategic their fleets, the warship never left a trace. It would appear, strike with terrifying precision, and disappear into the vast, empty space, leaving nothing behind but a chilling silence. But the warship wasn't the only mystery at play. The real question, growing with every failed attempt to catch it, was, what were the humans really after? Supreme Warlord Scifi couldn't shake the feeling that she was being played. Every move she made seemed to fall right into the humans' trap. The warship was only one part of a far bigger puzzle. The humans had created something so beyond the galaxy's understanding that even their strongest forces couldn't predict it. No one had seen such tactics, such precision, or such daring before. "They're not just hiding," Scifi mused aloud in her war room. "They're manipulating us. They know our every move before we make it." Admiral Vexor, now scared by the failed attempts to confront the warship, stood beside her. His eyes were hard, narrowed in thought. It was clear to him that this wasn't just a warship. It was a statement, a challenge. But one thing was becoming painfully clear. The more the galactic powers pushed, the more they fell into the humans' hands. "They're using us, Tyra," Vexor said, his voice tinged with frustration. "Each failure we face only teaches them more about us. They're setting us up for something bigger, and we don't even see it yet." The question lingered in the air. Why? Why would the humans go to such lengths? Why had they created a warship so powerful, so enigmatic, that it defied every law of physics and warfare? And why did they seem to have an almost perfect understanding of their enemies' next moves? Scifi paced back and forth, her mind racing through the possibilities. The humans were powerful. There was no denying that. But what if there was something even more dangerous at play? Something that was far beyond a mere warship. What if the warship was just a distraction, a decoy for something even more devastating? Meanwhile, in the deepest corners of the galaxy, rumors began to spread. The whispers spoke of a human leader, a figure so powerful, so shrouded in mystery, that their very name sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it. The leader was called Dread, but no one knew exactly who or what it was. Was it a human general, a warrior, or was it something else entirely? And then something strange began happening. Other alien fleets, those not aligned with Scifi, began reporting odd encounters. No major battles, no direct confrontations, just sightings. Quick, unsettling flashes of the warship, disappearing faster than a blink. The ship was no longer staying hidden, and yet it was impossible to catch. Vexor's fleet was growing tired. It had been weeks since their last confrontation with the warship. Their ships were battered, and morale was slipping. More than one captain had called for a retreat, but Shira had refused. They couldn't let the humans think they had the upper hand. Not after everything they had lost. We need to take action. Now. Zyra's voice was firm. The humans are mocking us. We cannot afford to wait any longer. But as the galaxy's leaders prepared their final, desperate offensive, one last message was sent from a captured human scout ship. The message was brief and to the point. We've watched you all long enough. You'll never defeat us, because you can't even see us. The message was signed with an emblem. A warship, the one that had been taunting them all along. But this time, it was different. The message wasn't a threat. It wasn't an insult. It was a declaration. Humans had won. Without even firing a shot, without even appearing in person, they had proven something no one had considered possible. Their victory didn't need to be fought. It just needed to be understood. And as the galactic leaders read the message, a terrible truth began to dawn on them. The warship wasn't just a weapon of destruction. It was a symbol of human ingenuity, of their capacity to adapt, evolve, and outthink even the most formidable enemies in the galaxy. It was then that the real horror set in. They hadn't lost the warship. They had lost to humanity's mind. They had underestimated them. And now, the galaxy would have to reckon with a new, terrifying force, one that had only just begun to show its true potential. And the worst part, no one even knew what humanity's next move would be. But the humans knew exactly what would happen next. The galaxy stood on the edge of something far greater than any of its leaders had expected. The warship had become more than just a weapon. It had become a symbol of humanity's mastery over the impossible. But the real threat was not just in the ship itself, but in the humans' audacity to control it, and to use it as a tool of chaos, control, and ultimately, revolution. Supreme Warlord Cyrus' fleet was broken. The constant failed attempts to capture or destroy the warship had drained her resources, her ships, and her confidence. But there was still a glimmer of defiance left in her eyes. She refused to believe that the humans had bested her. There had to be a weakness, a flaw, a chance to defeat them. She called for a final meeting with her highest commanders. The decision had to be made. The last move in the game. The warship had outsmarted them, yes, but if they could only find its weak point, if they could strike quickly and decisively, there was still a chance to reclaim dominance. "We're fighting ghosts," Glyra muttered to herself, glaring at the holographic map of the galaxy that was projected in front of her. It was a dark time for the Galactic Empire. Their intelligence was failing them. Their spies couldn't track the warship. Their fleets couldn't engage it. And yet, the humans were out there, watching, calculating their next move. But then, a new report came in, this time, from an unlikely source. A lone, independent merchant ship, unaligned with any major power, had stumbled upon a fragment of debris. It was nothing large, just a small metallic shard floating in the vastness of space. But what the ship's captain didn't realize was that it was a key. a key to understanding the true purpose of the warship. Zyra immediately ordered the ship to be seized, and the captain was brought before her. Under the weight of interrogation, the captain revealed something shocking. The fragment of debris wasn't just random. It was part of a larger mechanism, a code embedded into the very structure of the warship. But more than that, it contained a message. The message was clear, and it sent a shiver through Kyra's spine. The warship is not designed to destroy. It is designed to change the galaxy. The realization hit hard. Humanity wasn't just waging war. They were preparing for something far more insidious. The warship was not simply a weapon. It was the key to a galactic shift. A shift in power, control, and ultimately, the destiny of the entire galaxy. Zyra's thoughts raced. What were the humans planning? Was the warship the beginning of a new empire, one built on human ingenuity, not military might? Was humanity using this ship as a symbol to manipulate the galaxy into submission? One thing was becoming painfully clear. The humans weren't just playing for victory. They were playing for dominance. And they had a vision that no one had anticipated. On Earth, the leaders of the human fleet gathered for a quiet meeting. The warship, with its mysterious and powerful capabilities, was only the beginning. Their true goal was not to conquer the galaxy, it was to unite it. The galaxy, in its fractured state, had become a breeding ground for chaos and war. But what if it could be unified, brought together under one banner, one vision? Humans had always been survivors. They had always been able to adapt, to think outside the box, to build something from nothing. The warship, and the technology within it, were simply tools for a much larger purpose. The humans weren't interested in taking over the galaxy. They were interested in saving it. But how would the galaxy react when it realized this? The balance of power had already shifted. The warship wasn't just a war machine. It was a message. And that message was clear. Humanity was here to stay, and they would reshape the galaxy on their own terms. Back in the heart of the galactic empire, Zyra sat in silence. She had lost. The warship was no longer a symbol of military might. It was a symbol of humanity's ingenuity, their strength, and their ability to think beyond the impossible. The galaxy would never be the same again. And as much as she hated to admit it, she had to respect what the humans had done. Zyra's eyes narrowed as she stared at the holographic map, now showing human-controlled sectors growing rapidly. The galaxy was changing, and no one could stop it, not even the most powerful of empires. In the end, it wasn't the warship's weapons or technology that had won the day. It was humanity's unyielding determination, their ability to defy every expectation, and their refusal to be underestimated. The final gambit had been played, and the humans had won. But this was only the beginning of their rise to power. And the galaxy, still reeling from the shock of their victory, had no idea what was coming next. As the lights of distant stars flickered in the cold void of space, one thought echoed through the minds of every alien leader who had ever doubted humanity. What will the humans do next? And the answer, they soon realized, was far more terrifying than any warship could ever be. The galaxy was about to experience a revolution, and humanity was leading it. The galaxy had always been a vast expanse of chaos and control, where the strong dominated and the weak were left to scramble for survival. The Galactic Empire, a power that had long ruled with an iron fist, had underestimated humanity at every turn. And now, as the human warship, so advanced, and so far beyond anything the galaxy had seen, stood at the forefront, the rest of the galaxy was faced with an undeniable truth. The rules of power were about to change. Supreme Warlord Zyra, still recovering from the shock of humanity's victory, called an emergency council meeting. The threat was no longer just the warship, it was the humans themselves. Their strategy was clear now. They weren't just looking for power, they were creating a new order. But how could they be stopped? Across the galaxy, the news of the warship's capabilities spread like wildfire. The once dominant empires, each with their fleets and armies, began to feel the weight of the truth. The humans weren't merely a species fighting for survival. They were an unstoppable force of nature, capable of reshaping the galaxy with their ideas, their technology, and their resolve. As the Empire's leaders gathered to discuss their next move, one thing became increasingly apparent. The humans had won a battle that no one had expected them to win. And in doing so, they had set into motion a revolution that would leave the old order behind. On Earth, the leaders of the human fleet were making their own plans. They knew that the Warship wasn't the end of their story, it was just the beginning. The Warship had given them the power to force the galaxy into attention, to make the rest of the galaxy understand one thing above all. Humanity was not to be underestimated. "It's time for us to speak," Admiral Tanner said, addressing the assembled leaders of the human fleet. "We've played their game, and now it's time to make our own rules." The room fell silent. It was the same meeting they'd had countless times before, but this time, the stakes were different. There were no more pretenses. The humans had taken the first step towards something greater than they had ever imagined. "We are no longer the underdogs," Admiral Tanner continued, his voice steady, confident. "This warship is our symbol, but we must ensure that the galaxy knows that humanity's power isn't just in our technology. It's in our ability to adapt, to unite, and to dream of a better future." And as the Admiral spoke, the leaders around him nodded in agreement. The warship had captured the attention of the galaxy, but now it was time for humanity to stake its claim. The future would be theirs to shape. Meanwhile, as humanity prepared to shift the tides of the galaxy, a strange thing began to happen. Alien species who had once viewed humans as nothing more than a fleeting nuisance started to reconsider. There were whispers in the shadows of the galaxy, whispers of a new alliance forming, one that could challenge the entrenched powers of the old empires. For the first time in galactic history, humanity wasn't just reacting to the powers that had controlled the galaxy for centuries. They were leading a charge, igniting a movement that could bring unity and prosperity to every corner of the galaxy. The Empire's leadership, though still reeling from their defeat, began to take notice. Lyra, her mind still clouded with the shock of humanity's rise, understood one thing: she had underestimated them. The warship, which had once been seen as a mere tool of war, had now become a beacon of change. And no one, not even the most powerful alien empires, could ignore what humanity was about to do next. Across the galaxy, the response was mixed. Some species began to call for peace, recognizing the potential for cooperation with the humans. Others, fearful of losing their grip on power, began to rally their forces in preparation for the inevitable confrontation. But one thing was certain: the galaxy was no longer the same. Humanity had entered the stage, and they had no intention of being a footnote in galactic history. Back in the heart of the Galactic Empire, Cyrus' frustration turned to something else: respect. The humans had done something no one had believed possible. They had used the warship not just as a weapon, but as a symbol. The humans were no longer a threat to be destroyed. They were a force to be reckoned with. And Tyra knew it was only a matter of time before others would realize it too. The galaxy, for all its history and its power, was about to face its greatest challenge yet. A challenge not from a single empire, but from a species that refused to be bound by the old rules. Humanity's revolution was just beginning. It would not be stopped by fear, by force, or by any power that had ruled the galaxy before. And as the stars in the vast expanse of space twinkled, the galaxy knew the age of humanity had arrived, and the old empires had no choice but to follow or fall. The stage was set for a new era. The galaxy, for better or for worse, would soon learn what it meant to face the impossible, because now it was humanity's turn to define the future. The galaxy had changed forever. The impossible warship, once dismissed as a myth, had proven to be the catalyst that ignited a transformation no one could have predicted. The Galactic Empire, once an unchallenged superpower, now found itself on the defensive, struggling to adapt to the undeniable truth. Humanity was no longer a mere player in the galactic theater. It was the new force to be reckoned with. On Earth, the leaders of the human fleet gathered in a secure command room, the holographic display of the galaxy flickering before them. Their mission had always been survival, but now they had the power to reshape the very fabric of galactic politics. "We've done the impossible," Admiral Tanner said, looking around at the faces of his commanders. "But our real challenge begins now." The rest of the galaxy had witnessed humanity's rise, and they couldn't ignore the might of the warship or the ingenuity that had brought it into existence. But while some empires now considered negotiation or alliance, others prepared for an all-out war to restore the balance of power. Humanity had earned its place at the table, but their journey was far from over. They had proven themselves capable of unimaginable feats, but now they had to convince the galaxy that they were more than just a war-hardened species. They were a species with a vision for the future. As news of the warship's victory spread across the stars, ambassadors from various galactic powers began to reach out. The once dismissed humans were now being courted by alien species that had once viewed them as nothing more than primitives. The warship had shown them that humanity's potential wasn't limited to warfare. It was about progress, unity, and innovation. But there were darker forces at play. A faction within the Galactic Empire, furious at the disruption caused by the humans, began to secretly rally a fleet to take back control. They had underestimated humanity once before, but they were determined not to make the same mistake again. Across the galaxy, tensions grew. A galaxy that had lived under the thumb of the old empires was now looking to humanity for guidance. But could the humans lead a galaxy so steeped in tradition and corruption? Admiral Tanner stood before the warship, its massive hull reflecting the light of distant stars. The ship was a symbol of humanity's strength, but also of their responsibility. They had proven their might, but now they had to show the galaxy that they could be trusted to lead. "We have a chance to build something new," Tanner said, voice steady, yet full of determination. "We've seen what happens when we let others control the galaxy. It's time to rewrite the rules." The human fleet had the power to change the future of the galaxy, but with that power came immense responsibility. The warship was just the beginning. Now it was time for humanity to take its place as the architects of a new order, one that could bridge the gaps between civilizations, unite species that had never known peace, and end the long-standing reign of the old empires. However, with great power came inevitable conflict. As the human fleet expanded, so too did the number of enemies. The galactic empire's remaining loyalists, fueled by vengeance, began to muster an army to challenge humanity's rise. The warship, which had once been the symbol of humanity's strength, would soon become the focus of an even greater battle, one that could decide the fate of the entire galaxy. In the midst of this growing unrest, new alliances were formed. Alien species who had once feared the humans now saw them as a beacon of hope. For the first time in galactic history, the possibility of a united galaxy seemed within reach. But to achieve that, humanity had to confront its greatest challenge yet, the threat of a galaxy-wide war that could undo all their progress. As the new dawn of humanity began, Admiral Tanner looked out at the stars. They had already accomplished the impossible. They had built a warship that defied every known law of physics and warfare. But now, the real challenge was ahead of them. They had to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its ability to destroy, but in its ability to unite, to rebuild, and to forge a future where every species could coexist in peace. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of. Now it would see what humanity could do when it led with vision, not just with force. The impossible had been achieved, but the future, still unwritten, was humanity's to shape. And as the stars stretched out before them, humanity's journey had only just begun. The warship had been the spark. The galaxy was the canvas, and humanity, with its limitless potential, would now become the artists of their own destiny. The impossible had been done, but the impossible was only the beginning. The galaxy was a place filled with endless wonders and terrifying threats, but one thing all its inhabitants agreed on was this: humanity was not to be underestimated. No one knew this better than Supreme Warlord Zorath, the commander of the mighty Xathar Dominion, an empire that had conquered countless worlds. But what he had just heard, what he had just learned, it had shaken him to his core. A message, simple yet chilling, had arrived. A fleet of Xathar ships, sent to explore a remote and desolate sector of space, had vanished without a trace. No signals, no wreckage, no explanation. Just gone. And from that emptiness came a whisper, a rumor that began to spread across the galaxy, growing with each telling. The humans had done something impossible. Zorath, who had never feared any foe, sat in the command center of his flagship, his sharp eyes narrowing. He had heard these rumors, wild tales of a human warship that defied the very laws of physics. A ship that should not exist. Ships could be built to withstand attack, yes, but this warship was said to be able to obliterate anything in its path with unimaginable power. Impossible. But if it was true, it was a threat he couldn't ignore. He called for his advisors, his fleet commanders, and his brightest minds to gather. As the holograms of his trusted generals flickered to life around him, Zorath wasted no time. He was a conqueror, not a listener of rumors, but he knew better than to dismiss something that could threaten the future of his empire. "We need to find this ship," Zorath said, his voice cold. "If these humans have truly created a weapon like this, we must either control it or destroy it." But as the words left his lips, doubt lingered in the air. How could something like this even exist? No one had seen the ship, no one knew its true capabilities, yet the stories persisted. From the far reaches of the galaxy, scattered reports filtered in. Strange sightings, inexplicable events, and most alarming of all, the sudden disappearances of entire fleets. It was said that a human warship, unlike anything seen before, was moving through the galaxy. And no one could stop it. The Galactic Council, a collective of the most powerful alien races, was already in a state of unrest. The Council had long suspected that humanity's rapid technological advancements could one day pose a challenge. But this was different. The whispers were growing louder, spreading across the stars like wildfire, and each one had the same terrifying message. The impossible human warship is real. As Zorath's fleet prepared for an expedition into the sector where the Xathar fleet had disappeared, something strange happened. His sensors, designed to detect the faintest anomaly, began to pick up odd signals. At first, they were weak and scattered, like echoes from another time. But the closer they got to the sector, the more intense these signals became. Something was out there, something massive. And it wasn't just any ship, it was the warship that defied reason. Zorath ordered the fleet to stop. He wasn't a fool. There was something unsettling about this situation, and he wasn't going to charge blindly into it. His fleet moved into position, each ship ready for what might come. The ships were equipped with the latest weaponry, the most advanced technology the galaxy had ever seen. But what good were they against a ship that defied logic itself? Suddenly, without warning, the first ship of the Xathar fleet disappeared. No explosion, no warning signs, just gone. One moment, it was there. And the next, nothing remained. The fleet was frozen in shock, unsure of what had just happened. The captain of the ship had barely had time to send a distress signal before everything was silenced. The fleet had lost contact. Zorath stood motionless as the images of the destroyed ship flickered on the holographic screens in front of him. A cold shiver ran down his spine. This was not an ordinary attack. This wasn't something he could understand or predict. The warship wasn't just powerful. It was something else entirely. Impossible, Zorath muttered under his breath. What have the humans done? The battle-hardened warlord could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He had fought against the fiercest warriors the galaxy had to offer. But this was different. The humans had created something that was more than just a weapon. It was an enigma. It was a living nightmare. The fleet commanders exchanged nervous glances. They were experienced warriors, but none of them had ever faced anything like this. The humans had always been a small, insignificant race to the galaxy's powers. But now, the galaxy was looking at them with new eyes. Zorath's mind raced. He was a tactician, always planning several moves ahead. But right now, he was unsure of what to do next. Every option seemed wrong. If this human warship was real, they had to find it, capture it, or destroy it. But even that seemed like a task beyond them. Set course for the last known location of the fleet, Zorath ordered finally. Prepare for engagement. We will find this ship, and we will end it. As his fleet moved deeper into the sector, Zorath knew that what lay ahead would change the course of the galaxy forever. But what he didn't know was that the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy wasn't just the warship, it was the humans themselves. And soon, he would learn just how dangerous it was to challenge them. The whispers had just begun, and Zorath was about to find out that some legends are born from reality, not just myth. The dark expanse of space stretched out before them, an endless sea of stars and black void. Zorath's fleet continued its journey toward the sector where the Xathar fleet had vanished. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines and the occasional crackle of static over the communication channels. Tension hung in the air like a storm about to break, and none of the crew members aboard the flagship dared to speak. They had only one goal now: find the human warship, and if it existed, destroy it. Zorath paced in his command center, his mind consumed with the reports flooding in from his scouts. The signals were growing stronger now, more frequent, like the warship was getting closer. But there was no telling what they would find when they arrived. The thought of an entire fleet disappearing without a trace was disturbing enough. But the idea of facing the human warship so advanced, so beyond comprehension, was something that kept him awake at night. "Admiral," one of his officers said, breaking his thoughts, "we're approaching the coordinates. All ships are on alert." Zorath nodded sharply. "Prepare to engage, but do not fire unless I give the order. We don't know what we're dealing with yet." The fleet moved deeper into the sector, its ships forming a tight formation. The darkness of space seemed to close in around them, amplifying the growing sense of dread. Zorath's sensors were fully engaged, scanning for any sign of the warship. The minutes dragged on, and still, there was nothing. The quiet was suffocating. Then suddenly, a sharp blip on the radar. "We have contact," another officer shouted. "It's moving toward us. Fast." The fleet tensed. Zorath's eyes narrowed as he studied the radar readings. There was something there. A ship, large and powerful, but the readings were strange. They were unlike anything the fleet's sensors had ever encountered. The signature was faint at first, but then it grew clearer. The warship was real, and it was coming straight at them. "Open fire," Zorath commanded. But before the order could be fully relayed, the warship struck. A massive burst of energy erupted from the unknown vessel, a beam so intense it lit up the surrounding space like a second sun. The first ship of Zorath's fleet, the Kralon, was hit directly. The energy beam sliced through the ship's hull with terrifying precision, as if it had no resistance whatsoever. In a matter of seconds, the Kralon was no more, only debris scattered across the dark void. Zorath stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. The ship, it had just been obliterated. There was no explosion, no fireball, just silence and destruction. The beam from the human warship had cut through it like a knife through paper. "Report," Zorath shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. "The Kralon has been destroyed, sir. No survivors, no trace left. It was vaporized," the officer stammered, his voice filled with shock. Zorath's blood ran cold. This was no ordinary weapon. It was something far more advanced, something that shattered all known laws of warfare. How had the humans done this? How had they created such a force of nature? "Prepare the fleet to engage," Zorath ordered, his tone filled with grim determination. "We will retaliate. Focus all fire on that warship." The fleet's remaining ships moved into position, their weapons primed and ready. But before they could fire, another energy beam tore through the darkness, hitting the second ship in line. This time, the Vaxari, a formidable vessel known for its thick armor, was completely annihilated. Not a single scrap remained. Zorath gritted his teeth. This was madness. The human warship was too powerful, too fast. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a nightmare made real. Every time the fleet tried to retaliate, the warship disappeared and reappeared in another spot, attacking from angles no one could predict. "We cannot continue like this," Zorath said through clenched teeth. "We need to outsmart it. We need to find a weakness." But there was no time. Another shot was fired, and the Zoroth, one of Zorath's flagship's closest allies, was destroyed before anyone could react. It was clear that every ship in the fleet was being picked off, one by one. The human warship was moving with impossible precision, always staying one step ahead. It wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. Zorath's mind raced. He had fought in countless wars, but this was unlike anything he had ever faced. The humans had found a way to build a warship that defied logic, that surpassed every weapon in existence. It was as if they had created something from the future, a ship that belonged in no era. "Fall back," Zorath finally ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "All ships, retreat to the nearest nebula. We will regroup and reassess." But even as the remaining ships began to retreat, the human warship struck one final time. Another energy beam, another ship gone in an instant. Zorath's heart sank as he watched his fleet crumble, his empire's might being obliterated before his very eyes. The warship was still out there, its power undiminished. And as Zorath's flagship made its way into the safety of the nebula, he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy had just witnessed the beginning of humanity's rise to power. And no one was ready for what came next. The impossible warship had shown its true power, and there was no stopping it now. Zorath sat in the dark, staring at the flickering holographic map in front of him. The retreat had been messy. Too many ships lost in an instant. The galaxy had always known the humans as a minor species. Resourceful, yes, but nothing more than a nuisance at the edges of the great galactic powers. But now, everything had changed. Zorath's fleet was decimated, and the warship that had caused it was still out there. He slammed his fist on the armrest of his command chair. "I will not let this stand," he muttered under his breath. The humans had crossed a line that no one thought possible. They had made a weapon that not only defied logic, but made even the most advanced fleets quake in fear. But Zorath was no fool. He knew he had to learn everything about this new threat before they could launch another attack. This warship had made its presence known, but Zorath could still feel its shadow hanging over him. There was no time to waste. He had to plan, regroup, and find the one thing that could stop this terror: knowledge. "Send word to the High Command," Zorath ordered. "I want everything we know about the humans. Every scrap of intelligence we have. If this warship is truly theirs, we need to understand how they made it." His officers scrambled to carry out his orders, but Zorath knew the truth. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for too long. They'd written them off as primitive, harmless. But if what he'd just witnessed was any indication, that was a grave mistake. As he waited for the intel to arrive, his mind wandered back to the warship. It had appeared from nowhere. No warning, no sign of its presence. Zorath had seen many warships in his time, but nothing like this. It didn't fit into any of the patterns he knew. Its technology was unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. The way it moved, the way it destroyed everything in its path. There were no conventional tactics to counter it. It was as if the ship operated on a different set of laws altogether. a set of rules that Zorath had never even considered. The silence in the command center was oppressive. Zorath's fingers drummed on the console, his thoughts swirling. He had to outsmart this warship, but how? He needed something, anything, that could give him an edge. Finally, the transmission from High Command came through. A data stream of files, reports, and ancient intelligence about humanity. Zorath accessed the files, his eyes scanning rapidly across the pages. There were snippets of ancient Earth history, technologies that had been invented centuries ago, and strange reports from various scouts. One particular file caught his attention: Project Nemesis. It seemed to be an experimental program from Earth's history, something involving military technology and weapons development, but there were gaps, holes in the information. As Zorath dug deeper into the report, he found mention of a weapon system designed to alter the laws of physics, but it was all theoretical. No one had ever seen anything like it. Until now. Zorath leaned back in his chair, a sense of unease washing over him. It was all beginning to come together. The warship wasn't just a product of human ingenuity. It was the culmination of centuries of experiments, of technology thought to be impossible by every galactic standard. The humans had tapped into something more powerful than anyone had realized, and now, that power was standing at the threshold of the galaxy, ready to reshape the balance of power forever. Admiral, an officer interrupted his thoughts. We've received word from the front line. The humans are massing a force near the outer rim. It appears they're preparing for something bigger. Zorath's eyes narrowed. How many ships? Not many, sir. But the reports say they are all heavily armed and equipped with the latest in human technology. Zorath's mind raced. He knew the humans were bold, but this was something different. If they were gathering a fleet, this was no longer just about defending their own territory. The humans were about to make their move. Zorath's hand clenched into a fist. He wasn't going to sit back and let them surprise him again. This time, he would strike first. He would show the galaxy that Zorath, the supreme warlord, would never be caught off guard. And he would ensure that the human warship would not be the weapon that changed everything. Prepare the fleet, Zorath commanded, his voice cold and determined. We will track them down before they can do anything else. The time to hunt is now. They will not escape us again. As the fleet moved into position, Zorath's thoughts continued to churn. The warship was more than just a ship. It was a message, one that had been sent across the stars. Humanity was no longer a minor species. They were a force to be reckoned with. And Zorath knew, deep in his heart, that this was only the beginning. The impossible warship had changed the rules of the game. Now it was up to Zorath to figure out how to survive the storm that humanity had unleashed. Zorath's fleet loomed in the dark expanse of space, its ships lining up in perfect formation. The cold, calculated precision of his command was something most galactic leaders admired. But today, something felt different. The thrill of the hunt was mixed with the bitter taste of uncertainty. His fleet was prepared, but the unknown enemy, the human warship, was a wild card, a force that couldn't be predicted. Zorath stared at the holographic map before him, his fingers twitching with impatience. He had learned everything he could from the intel. Humans, despite their seeming simplicity, were terrifyingly resourceful. What was once considered impossible, they had made real. And now, they were coming. A transmission blinked on his console. Admiral, the human fleet has been located. They've appeared in the outer rim as predicted. But the officer paused, confusion in their voice. There's only one ship, sir. Zorath's brow furrowed. One ship. The humans were known for their unpredictability. But one ship didn't make sense. He had expected them to come with a force, a show of strength. But this was something else entirely. Send the coordinates to the fleet, Zorath ordered, his voice tight with suppressed anger. Prepare for engagement. We'll destroy this warship before it can do any more damage. As the fleet moved into position, Zorath could feel the tension grow. The human warship's presence was unlike anything he had encountered. It was almost as if the ship itself defied the very laws of reality. Every instinct in Zoreth's body told him this was a trap, one he was walking right into. The human warship came into view, its silhouette sharp against the backdrop of distant stars. At first glance, it appeared almost fragile, too small, too sleek. But then Zoreth saw it, a glow emanating from its core, a strange energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. That's when he realized the truth. The warship wasn't just advanced. It was alive with power. "Admiral," a voice crackled over the comms. "The human ship is charging its weapons." Before Zoreth could give an order, the first shot rang out. A blinding flash of light erupted from the human warship, so bright and sudden that it left a trail of afterimages in Zoreth's eyes. His fleet's lead ship was struck instantly, its shields unable to absorb the force. The ship was torn apart in a single moment, reduced to nothing but dust in the vacuum of space. Zoreth's breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary weapon. It was something beyond comprehension. The fleet had barely registered the attack before they had lost one of their own. "Report," Zoreth shouted, shields failing across the fleet. "Admiral, the weapon, it's bypassing our defenses entirely." Another officer's voice, full of panic, echoed through the comms. Zoreth clenched his jaw. This warship, this weapon, was more terrifying than he had imagined. It wasn't just about firepower. It was about a complete disregard for the known laws of physics. The humans had created something that could obliterate entire fleets in seconds. But why send just one ship? A sudden realization hit Zoreth like a bolt of lightning. The human warship wasn't attacking out of malice. It was sending a message. It was showing the galaxy just how much power humanity now wielded. The entire galaxy had underestimated them, written them off as a species to be ignored. But now, humanity was making its presence known. Zoreth's eyes narrowed. He wasn't going to be the one to cower in fear. He had led countless battles, and no weapon, no matter how powerful, could intimidate him. "Retreat," he bellowed, slamming his fist down on the armrest. "We'll regroup, analyze, and strike again. This isn't over." But even as the command was given, Zoreth knew the truth. The battle had changed something inside him. The galaxy wasn't going to remain the same. The humans had done something they shouldn't have been able to do, and now they were paying the price. Or perhaps they were leading the galaxy to a new era, one that was no longer under the control of the old powers. As Zoreth's fleet retreated into the darkness, a strange mix of anger and respect filled his chest. Humanity had just shown the galaxy that it had the power to change the very fabric of space warfare. And in that moment, Zoreth knew that he wasn't just dealing with a threat. He was facing an enemy that might reshape the galaxy itself. This battle was over, but the war had just begun. The galaxy was still reeling from the shock of the human warship's devastating attack. News of the single ship that had crippled an entire fleet spread like wildfire across the stars, sparking fear, awe, and curiosity. No one could deny it anymore. Humanity had created something beyond imagination. A ship that defied all laws of physics, capable of erasing entire fleets in the blink of an eye. Yet, amidst the fear, something else lingered. A question. Why had they only sent one? On Earth, far from the chaos unfolding in deep space, humanity's leaders watched the events with a mix of pride and concern. They knew that sending one ship to make a statement had been a calculated risk, a gamble that could change the course of history. It wasn't just a message, it was a warning. Admiral Lilina Torres stood at the helm of the human warship, Sovereign Wrath. She watched as her crew prepared for what could be the last encounter in a long and dangerous game. The Sovereign Wrath had only one mission: to show the galaxy that humanity would not be underestimated. "Admiral," a voice interrupted her thoughts. "The galactic powers are mobilizing. They've sent a force to confront us. Several fleets are heading our way." Torres nodded. She had expected this. The galaxy would not back down quietly, and the immense threat posed by the sovereign wrath had stirred something deep in the core of every major power. They feared what they didn't understand. "They'll come," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Let them come. We've prepared for this." For months, the human warship had been stationed on the edge of the galaxy, waiting for the moment to strike. The crew, handpicked from the best humanity had to offer, had trained for this day, knowing the odds were stacked against them. But it was more than just technology that made them dangerous. It was their spirit, their unwillingness to be conquered. "We have the advantage," said Lieutenant Kira, the ship's tactical officer. "Our energy weapons can wipe out fleets in a single shot. But I'm worried, Admiral. They're bringing reinforcements. There's no telling how many ships they'll throw at us." Torres considered this. It was true that their ship's weaponry was capable of unimaginable destruction, but humanity couldn't rely solely on brute force. They needed to be clever. The warship wasn't invincible. In the end, it was the human mind that would determine the outcome of this confrontation. "We'll use their fear against them," Torres said, a sly smile creeping onto her lips. "We don't need to destroy them all. Just show them that we can." As the fleets of the galactic powers advanced, the sovereign wrath stood firm, a lone titan in the darkness. Its shields pulsed with energy, and the ship's engines hummed with the power of the unknown. The tension in the crew was palpable, but their resolve was stronger than ever. "Admiral, we're in range," said Kira. "They're positioning themselves for a strike." Torres didn't flinch. She'd been in tight spots before, and she knew how to keep her head when it counted. "Hold your fire," she commanded. "Let them think they have the upper hand." The enemy fleets closed in, their weapons charging, their warships dwarfing the human vessel in size and number. It was a classic tactical maneuver. Surround the enemy, overwhelm them, and strike when they least expect it. Then, in a single instant, everything changed. Without warning, the sovereign wrath fired. A burst of energy shot from the warship's core, so powerful that it left a wake of shattered space behind it. The beam didn't just hit its target, it obliterated it, erasing the enemy ship before it even had a chance to react. A massive flagship, one of the most advanced in the galaxy, was gone, nothing but dust and scattered debris. The enemy fleet hesitated. Shock rippled through their ranks. They had seen the human warship destroy entire fleets in an instant, but this was something else. They were looking at a weapon that didn't just break the rules of war, it defied the very nature of existence. "Sir," they'd fired. One of the enemy commanders shouted in disbelief. "Our flagship. It's gone. Completely destroyed." Torres watched the chaos unfold on the tactical screen. It was a victory, but she knew this wasn't the end. The galaxy's most powerful fleets were still coming. But that single shot, just one, had done what was necessary. It had sent a clear message. Humanity was not to be underestimated. "They'll rethink their strategy now," Torres said quietly. "They'll know what we're capable of. But this is just the beginning. We've got one more move to make." The crew of the Sovereign Wrath was poised for action, but Torres knew they couldn't rest on their laurels. There would be more challenges ahead, and humanity would face them head-on. As the enemy fleets regrouped, the Sovereign Wrath prepared for the next phase of the fight. The war wasn't over, but humanity had just shown the galaxy that they were no longer a force to be ignored. The game had only just begun. The galaxy was in chaos. After the shocking destruction of an enemy flagship by a single strike from the Sovereign Wrath, the galaxy's most powerful fleets were in disarray. Fear had spread like wildfire, and no one knew how to respond. The enemy leaders, who had once dismissed humanity as a weak and insignificant force, now found themselves at the mercy of a power they could not understand. They had underestimated Earth, and now they were paying the price. But despite the destruction, despite the terror that had rippled across the galaxy, Admiral Lelina Torres knew that the hardest part was still ahead. The Sovereign Wrath had proven its power, but humanity couldn't afford to let their guard down. The enemy was regrouping, and they wouldn't give up without a fight. They had the resources, the ships, and the will to destroy the sovereign wrath once and for all. "We've made our mark," Torres said, her voice steady despite the tension that gripped the bridge. "But they won't let this slide. We need to prepare for the next wave." Lieutenant Kira, standing by the ship's tactical console, nodded. "They're massing a fleet, the largest we've seen so far. It's coming straight for us." Torres could feel the weight of their situation pressing down on her. The sovereign wrath had already destroyed a flagship and crippled several enemy ships, but they couldn't take on a full-scale fleet head-to-head without taking massive losses. Humanity had no illusions about their chances. They had one shot at this. "How much time do we have?" Torres asked. Kira's eyes scanned the tactical screen, her fingers moving rapidly across the console. "Not long. At their current speed, they'll be within striking range in less than an hour." The crew worked quickly, preparing the ship for the final confrontation. The sovereign wrath was a marvel of human engineering, but even it couldn't fight an entire fleet head-to-head without suffering significant damage. Torres knew that, but she wasn't about to give up. Not after everything humanity had accomplished. The sovereign wrath wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol of human resilience, ingenuity, and defiance. They had built it against all odds, and they would use it to stand against the galaxy. "We don't have the numbers, but we do have something they don't," Torres said, her eyes steely with determination. "We have the element of surprise. We have our will to win." Kira raised an eyebrow. "You're not thinking of charging them head-on, are you, Admiral?" Torres smiled faintly. "No, but we're going to show them what it means to underestimate humanity." The crew of the Sovereign Wrath went to work, fine-tuning their strategy, modifying their weapon systems, and preparing for the inevitable onslaught. But it wasn't just about the ship's weapons. The Sovereign Wrath was designed to outthink its enemies, to outmaneuver them when brute force wasn't enough. And humanity was ready to exploit that advantage. As the enemy fleet closed in, the tension on the ship reached a fever pitch. Every crew member knew this could be their final battle. But they were ready to make the ultimate sacrifice to ensure humanity's survival. They had fought hard to get this far, and they would fight harder still. "Admiral," Kira said, her voice tight with urgency, "they're in range. They've started their attack formation." Torres stood tall, her face grim. "Initiate Phase 1. We're not here to fight fair. We're here to win." The Sovereign Wrath powered up its main weapons, its energy shields flickering as they absorbed the incoming fire. For a moment, the crew could feel the raw power of the enemy fleet, the weight of their attack pushing against the human ship. But Torres knew that they were ready. It was time to show the galaxy what humanity was made of. The Sovereign Wrath launched into action, weaving through the enemy fire with precision and grace. Every movement was calculated, every shot fired with purpose. The ship's weapons blazed, tearing through enemy vessels with terrifying efficiency. In a matter of minutes, the human warship had obliterated several of the largest ships in the enemy fleet, leaving a wake of destruction in its path. But the enemy was relentless. They didn't back down. They didn't retreat. They came at the Sovereign Wrath with everything they had. As the battle raged on, Torres's mind raced. She knew that the tide could turn at any moment. The Sovereign Wrath could be destroyed, and with it, humanity's chance to prove itself. But she couldn't afford to let that happen. She couldn't afford to let Earth fall. "We're going to finish this," Torres said, her voice unwavering. "One final strike." The crew was ready. The Sovereign Wrath powered up its final weapon, a massive energy beam capable of destroying entire fleets in a single shot. The galaxy had never seen anything like it, and with one last push, humanity would prove to the stars that they were not a force to be ignored. The beam fired, cutting through the enemy fleet with surgical precision. One by one, enemy ships disintegrated under the overwhelming power of humanity's final strike. The enemy fleet was decimated, its ships reduced to nothing but ashes and debris. The battle was over. Humanity had won. But as the sovereign wrath drifted through the debris of the battle, Torres knew this victory was only the beginning. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's strength, but there were more challenges ahead. More enemies who would rise to challenge Earth. But no matter what, humanity would never back down. They had proven one thing to the stars. They were not just a blip in the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with. And they were just getting started. The sovereign wrath floated in the silence of space, a warship unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The battle was over, the fleet of enemies reduced to scattered debris, and their threat erased. Yet for Admiral Elena Torres and the crew aboard the ship, the victory felt bittersweet. They had proven their strength, but the galaxy had also seen just how powerful humanity could become. Torres stood on the bridge, gazing at the vast emptiness beyond the viewports, her face reflecting the weight of their triumph. The crew moved silently around her, their expressions grim, knowing the stakes of what they had just accomplished. The sovereign wrath had torn through enemy forces like paper, but they all knew this wasn't the end. "We've done it," Lieutenant Kira said quietly, her voice breaking the silence. "We've shown them who we are." "Not just who we are," Torres replied, her voice firm, "but who we can become." Humanity had been underestimated by every alien race they'd encountered. No one had believed that the small, fragile species from Earth could challenge the galactic giants. But now, with the sovereign wrath at the forefront, humanity had proven that they could not only fight, but win. They had shattered every expectation, rewritten the rules of warfare, and created a weapon that was not just advanced, but legendary. However, the quiet was unsettling. They had won a monumental battle, but this wasn't the last war. There would be others. The galaxy was vast, and while many would now think twice before challenging humanity, some races would seek revenge. Some would want to test the limits of the human will. "Admiral, we've received a transmission," Kira said, her eyes narrowing as she read the incoming message. "It's from the Galactic Council." Torres frowned. The Council had been silent during the entire conflict. They had watched as humanity's warship had swept through the enemy fleets, and now they were reaching out. She couldn't help but wonder what they wanted now that the dust had settled. "Put it on screen," she ordered. The screen flickered, and an image of the Galactic Council appeared before them. The faces of various alien species filled the display. The once arrogant, dismissive leaders now looked uneasy. The leader of the council, a towering alien known as Varish, spoke first. "Admiral Torres," he began, his voice serious. "We have been watching. The events that transpired during this conflict have left us with many questions. Your ship, the Sovereign Wrath, has displayed capabilities far beyond anything we believed was possible for your species. You have proven yourself a force to be reckoned with. But this warship, this ship is a threat to the balance of the galaxy." Torres stood tall, meeting the gaze of the council. She could feel their eyes on her, filled with a mixture of awe and fear. "We are not a threat," she replied calmly, her voice unwavering. "We are simply a people who have decided to fight for our survival, and we've done so on our terms." Varish narrowed his eyes. "But you are no longer the same humanity we once knew. The Sovereign Wrath has changed everything. We cannot allow one species to hold such power, unchecked. You must be held accountable for the destruction you've caused." A wave of tension spread through the bridge. Torres could feel the weight of the council's words. They feared what humanity could become. But they weren't wrong. The Sovereign Wrath was a weapon unlike any other, and with it, humanity could reshape the future. But how? "We did what was necessary," Torres said. "We will not apologize for protecting our people, but we will not be reckless with the power we now possess. We are not your enemy, and we are not here to conquer. We are here to survive." The council members exchanged glances, their unease growing. The humans had made it clear that they would not back down, and in that moment, Torres realized something. This wasn't about whether humanity was a threat or not. It was about the galaxy coming to terms with the fact that Earth had risen, and with it, an entirely new kind of power. We have no interest in war, Torres continued, her voice calm but strong. But if you want to test us, we will defend ourselves. We will defend Earth. And we will defend this ship. The Sovereign Wrath was built not just as a weapon, but as a message to the galaxy. Humanity is here to stay. The transmission ended abruptly. The Council had no further words. They had been forced to confront the reality that humanity was no longer the underdog, the vulnerable species they had once dismissed. The galaxy would never see Earth the same way again. Torres turned back to her crew, her eyes steely with determination. Let them fear us. Let them remember that we are not to be underestimated. The Sovereign Wrath is the symbol of humanity's strength, and we will use it to ensure that Earth has a place among the stars. The crew stood silently, nodding in agreement. They knew what was at stake. The battle was over for now, but the war for humanity's future had only just begun. And with the Sovereign Wrath at the forefront, humanity would not be easily forgotten. They had set the stage for a new era, an era where they were no longer just a small, insignificant species. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy would have to learn to live with it. The Sovereign Wrath was more than a ship. It was the future, and the galaxy had just witnessed the dawn of a new age.